Tonight, the Supreme Court faces a crisis that could reshape both the American economy and the balance of power in Washington. A trade war, triggered by President Trump's sweeping tariffs, has escalated into a constitutional showdown. This isn't just about higher prices. It's about who holds the power to shape America's economic destiny. In early 2025, President Trump imposed a 60% tariff on all Chinese goods and 25% on imports from the EU and Japan, citing national security. The fallout was immediate: supply chains broke down, farmers lost export markets, and manufacturers faced soaring costs. Laws meant for emergencies are now being used to rewrite global trade, raising a profound question: has Congress given away too much power to the president? The Supreme Court must now decide if one person can unilaterally alter America's economic relationships with the world. This is more than a tariff dispute. It's a battle over the future of American democracy and the global order. The stakes could not be higher. To understand today's crisis, we need to look back. The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to regulate foreign commerce. For over 150 years, Congress set tariffs, but political gridlock led to disasters like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff of 1930, which deepened the Great Depression. In response, Congress began shifting trade authority to the president, starting with the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act of 1934. Over decades, laws like the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 and the Trade Act of 1974 gave presidents sweeping powers, especially in the name of national security. Section 232 of the 1962 Act lets the president impose tariffs if imports threaten national security. Section 301 of the 1974 Act allows retaliation against unfair trade. These broad laws, meant for emergencies, now let presidents reshape the global economy. The legal framework President Trump used in 2025 is the result of this slow transfer of power. Now, the Supreme Court must decide if Congress's decades-old delegation has gone too far. The outcome could redefine the limits of presidential power over trade. 2025 began with economic shockwaves. On February 15th, President Trump announced a 60% tariff on all Chinese imports, citing national security. Weeks later, a 25% tariff hit all auto imports from the EU and Japan, targeting allies and disrupting major automakers' supply chains. By April, tariffs expanded to steel, aluminum, and a range of consumer goods, sparking global retaliation. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce warned, these tariffs are attacks on American families and businesses. By mid-2025, the U.S. was in a multi-front trade war, with tariffs covering nearly $1 trillion in imports from over 40 countries. Businesses couldn't plan, and the use of national security as a catch-all justification became the legal flashpoint. The rapid escalation left the economy reeling and set the stage for a Supreme Court showdown. The question: can the president wield such sweeping power without Congress? The answer will shape America's economic future. The tariff's impact was immediate and personal. Manufacturers relying on imported parts faced soaring costs. A mid-sized Ohio electronics company saw microchip prices jump 50%, halting expansion and hiring. Farmers were devastated as China and the EU retaliated, targeting American exports like soybeans and pork. One Iowa farmer lamented, "I voted for him, but now I have silos full of beans I can't sell." For consumers, prices climbed across the board. The National Retail Federation estimated families would pay $2,000 more per year. New cars cost $1,500 more on average, and even untariffed goods saw price hikes as costs rippled through the economy. Inflation spiked, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported a net loss of 150,000 manufacturing jobs. Small businesses, lacking resources to adapt, were hit hardest. The tariffs, meant to protect American jobs, instead fueled uncertainty and hardship. The promise of economic revival was replaced by rising costs and shrinking paychecks. The pain was widespread, from factory floors to kitchen tables. The nation was left questioning whether the cure was worse than the disease. The world struck back fast. Led by the EU, countries like Japan, South Korea, and Canada formed a reciprocal action alliance, imposing targeted tariffs on iconic U.S. products: Kentucky bourbon, Wisconsin cheese, Florida oranges. Their goal pressured key American lawmakers by hitting their districts. Beyond tariffs, nations accelerated efforts to cut U.S. components from their supply chains. China invested billions in domestic tech, while the EU launched its own strategic autonomy initiative. New trade blocs formed, excluding America, as the Trans-Pacific Partnership deepened ties with the EU. The global order was shifting. America was no longer at the center. The world wasn't just retaliating, it was building a new economic system without the US. The constitutional battle lines were drawn. As economic pain grew, Congress argued President Trump had overstepped his legal authority. Lawmakers said national security was being used as a pretext to bypass Congress's power over trade. Business groups sued, claiming the president's actions were an unconstitutional abuse of delegated power. The legal fight centered on the non-delegation doctrine, the idea that Congress can't hand over its lawmaking power without clear limits. The administration argued the president was acting within the law, and if Congress disagreed, it should change the law. A split appeals court decision made Supreme Court review inevitable. The case became about more than tariffs. It was a test of the separation of powers. Only the Supreme Court could resolve this fundamental question. Experts were deeply divided. Most economists condemned the tariffs as self-inflicted economic harm, warning of higher inflation, lower growth, and job losses. Paul Krugman called it economic malpractice, arguing trade wars hurt everyone. Supporters like Peter Navarro insisted the pain was necessary to restore U.S. industry and national security. Legal scholars focused on the non-delegation doctrine. Professor Jennifer Now said the case could force the Supreme Court to finally set limits on Congress's power to delegate. A ruling against the administration could reshape administrative law and check presidential power. Others, like Professor Jack Goldsmith, warned that letting judges set trade policy could create new problems. The court, he argued, might prefer a narrow ruling over a sweeping constitutional change. The debate revealed deep divisions over the right balance of power. The stakes, not just trade, but the future of American democracy. The nation waited for the court's answer. The Supreme Court heard the case in a packed courtroom with the nation watching. Conservative justices questioned whether Section 232 gave the president too much unchecked power. Liberal justices worried about the chaos of overturning decades of precedent. The swing justices searched for a middle ground, reining in the president without upending the system. The core question: who decides America's economic fate, Congress or the president? Business groups argued the Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate commerce and levy tariffs. Allowing one person to impose massive taxes, they said, was a dangerous concentration of power. The administration countered that presidents need flexibility to act quickly in a complex world. Striking down this authority, they warned, would tie the hands of future leaders. The court faced a choice: judicial restraint or a bold rebalancing of power. On July 25, 2025, the nation waited for the Supreme Court's decision. The ruling would redraw the map of power in Washington, either cementing a strong presidency or restoring Congress's role in trade. A win for the president could mean more unilateral action and global uncertainty. A ruling against the administration could force Congress to reclaim its authority, but risk gridlock. Either way, the trade war had already fractured the global order and damaged trust in U.S. leadership. American businesses and workers faced a long road to recovery in a more fragmented world. The crisis forced a reckoning over America's place in the world and the nature of its democracy. It exposed the risks of concentrated power and the fragility of global cooperation. The tariffs and the court case were symptoms of a deeper struggle over what kind of nation America wants to be. The answer will shape the country's future long after the final ruling is read.